And then I never watched YouTube when I was younger, ever.
Well, they didn't have YouTube.
Not
way,
that, no,
way
no,
back
but,
when
but
we
like
were,
when we started this, I didn't watch YouTube when we first started this. I took the Defender to that, and I realized on that trip that this machine's not made for that. So that led me to the rmax.
So, would you say that the bulk of your inspiration for trips comes from YouTube, or just from searching the internet for cool places to ride on ATVs and UTVs?
I think at first it was ideas in my head, number one.
Mm-hmm.
It evolved to searching stuff on the internet. And then I never watched YouTube when I was younger, ever.
Well, they didn't have YouTube.
Not
way,
that, no,
way
no,
back
but,
when
but
we
like
were,
when we started this, I didn't watch YouTube when we first started this. I had no idea that people had YouTube channels and made videos and places that I had no idea. I just never paid attention to that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even do a lot of social media stuff. But it became something where, you look up your research and stuff, try to plan this trip, and it's like, go to YouTube. There's somebody had to do it on YouTube. Mm-hmm. So I started, looking at it a little bit, YouTube. And now YouTube for me, I watch more YouTube than I watch anything else. YouTube became the number one eventually. Because you can always find somebody on there that's done something similar, and it gives you a video or like a picture into what they're seeing. Now, just like anybody on YouTube will tell you, the camera doesn't show exactly what you're seeing, but it gives you a basis on where to go to. And the Newfoundland, that's why I ran across the YouTube channel for this guy in Canada that does it all the time, and he talks about the planning and stuff like that, but it's like he hangs out with his buddies and he gets a group to go and they just have a blast on the trail, and that was real interesting to me. So COVID happened. We didn't do Newfoundland. I had it already planned and everything, bunch of different versions of it, and we decided, well, we want to go somewhere. Where can we go? We went to New Hampshire, and that was.
It was a good thing we went to.
It was a good place to start because we were like a little clueless when we got out there and what we needed, what could happen. We didn't plan for a lot. A simple thing. I'll give you an example. When we were out there, I can't remember how many machines we had, but not one person in the group except for my machine. And the only reason I had it wasn't because I put it on for this trip, but on the Defender I had a big light bar on the top. And the reason I put the light bar on there was for hauling deer out or doing work when it started to get dark, hauling firewood or doing something around the cabin. I had a light on there. I had just, I put it on there. So we're riding and we get caught after dark when you're not allowed to ride because a couple of trail closings that we didn't plan for. We didn't have things set up to get around things.
We circled the same lake for like 4 hours.
So we were driving.
We
were driving at dark in a pouring down rain, and I was the only one that had a light bar. Thank God I had one because we wouldn't have been able to see the trail anywhere.
Right.
So,
I think we learned a lot in New Hampshire. Just that first ride, we learned a lot.
So when you say it wasn't really like overlanding, we initially stayed in a cabin. Right? How did you find that cabin?
Online. I talked. Actually, I got online on a Facebook page for it's called Ride the Wilds, is the place in New Hampshire, and it said it had like 1,300 miles of trails, and I went through these different areas and the mountains and this and that. And so I just reached out to people on Facebook and said, hey, when people travel to go there, where do they stay? What's recommendations? And, it's the internet. Everything's the truth on the internet. You know how that goes. Mm-hmm. So you kind of just vet those sources out and what people tell you, and just add some more research, and then you end up finding things and then this is one of the things I like to do. I'm not a big talk to people over email. I do that, or text messages. I like to talk to people on the phone so you can hear their voice. Mm-hmm. And if you can, nowadays, maybe a video call with somebody. If they're willing to do that, it just gives me a little bit sense of I can judge if I'm getting, the honest truth out of people, or if they're just trying to sell you on something that they think is all right. Because ultimately, you're driving long distance. I mean, what was it, 20 hours to New Hampshire for us? Two stops?
Yeah, something like that.
And we don't know. We've never been there. I've never been to New Hampshire. We didn't know what we were getting ourselves into. So it was comforting to know that I actually talked to this guy over and over. And, and the other thing while we're talking about talking to people, and Greg's brought this up numerous times on our trips, and this goes into my planning as well. Anytime we can go to a mom and pop shop or small family owned businesses and give them our money, we tend to want to do that. We steer away from big organizations that maybe don't have customer service or they just care about making the money, getting people in and out of places. And we've been successful with finding those kind of places, and the conversations we have, that goes back to that first point we started with here. Why do we overland? That's one of the reasons why we overland.
Right.
You get to meet people that you're out of your comfort zone. You get to meet people that you would never meet in your lifetime. You'd never cross paths with them unless we did this stuff, overlanding.
Right. So part of the safety and security for you in planning these trips is that phone call.
Yep.
You learn a lot about somebody talking to them over the telephone. You can't do face-to-face typically when you're planning a trip, but there's a little bit of personal touch to having that phone contact with that person. So
yeah.
we stayed in two cabins, Cardinal cabins it was called.
Yeah.
In
Colebrook or Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh, right.
Yeah, Pittsburgh.
So we were there for a week, and
Pittsburgh,
we did the trail systems around there. And then we moved down to Gorham.
Which is towards I guess the Green Mountains.
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
And stayed in a not so savory place.
Yeah.
Right? There was an old beat up motel.
And there wasn't, surprisingly, we expected more out of that area. There wasn't a whole lot of, in Pittsburgh, it was remote. I mean, it was like remote. You're in the middle of nowhere. And they built these cabins, and, we got to.
Across the street, they were getting maple syrup. There was lines between trees getting maple syrup.
That.
So we get to Berlin-Gorham area. It was a small little town, but like Greg said, the hotel was not what we saw online. The pictures were, somebody must have taken pictures and photoshopped them or something, but it was kind of a dump. But all we did was sleep there. I mean, it was tolerable. I wouldn't go back there.
But that's one of the things that we learned.
Yes, yep.
Because on that motel, you didn't reach out in advance. You just found the motel and said, we're going to book rooms there.
Yeah.
Versus the personal contact that you made with the fella at Cardinal Cabins. But one of the questions that you also asked, and I think that's important to note too, is do you prefer cash versus credit? Do you offer discounts for cash?
Yes.
And so on.
Because in this society, some of these smaller businesses, they have to pay a charge for credit cards. And then we have to pay a charge for credit cards in addition to. So we prefer cash. And then it's important for me to make sure that, when I tell guys this is what the trip's going to cost, I don't I never wanted to say, okay, we're going to go here and let's just spend a bunch of money and I'll tell you what it is in the end. I'm not like that. I'm a planner, and if I tell them it's going to be X amount of dollars each guy, that's what those guys should have to pay. And if I make a mistake, then I cover that.
Well, one of the things that I appreciate, not only the cost up front, knowing how much it's going to cost to stay at this place and this place and so on, is Rob does an agenda for us as well that not only talks about how much it's going to cost there, but how many miles it's going to take to get there, what amenities they have available to us once we get there, in showers, laundry, and so on. When you do the overlanding trips, there are some days where you don't get all those amenities. So when Rob's doing the planning, he tries to split it up so that maybe every third day we have full amenities, or certain amenities this location, different amenities at the next location. And he puts that out in advance, and we actually, Rob does not run off the seat of his pants when he's scheduling these trips, planning these trips. If you think you're going to get into overlanding and just wing it, I think that's where your failures are, and that's where we've talked about bringing other people with us from other YouTube channels, and there's some hesitation there because they don't know.
Yeah. And
they've not seen evidence of your pre-planning that you do. So I think it's important to note that you have to plan these things in advance, talk it over with the people that you're riding with, because there are things that Robbie may overlook, and Wayne sees it, or I see it, or John sees it, and say, hey, well, we didn't consider this.
Laundry has turned into a big thing. We always, every so many days, we have some place where we can do laundry, which cuts down on the amount of clothes we have to bring, which saves space in the machine.
Yeah.
And that's huge. Because like the first trip we went on, we were staying in cabins and stuff like that. So we just kind of brought everything because we could just throw it in the cabin when we got there. It was all in the truck, throw it in the cabin, whatever. You fast forward to Newfoundland and Idaho. Newfoundland for sure. We knew when we got to Nova Scotia, that was the last time we were going to see our truck for 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
There's no, hey, I left my deodorant in the truck.
Same thing with Idaho.
Right, because once you get to Nova Scotia, it was what, a 12-hour, 16-hour boat ride to the west side of Newfoundland.
East side.
East side of Newfoundland. So, and then we were on the island of Newfoundland for 10 days. So I don't think any of us had a free square inch of space in our machine anywhere.
Yeah, so going back to how I plan stuff, or what goes into it. We touched on the idea thing, and then you pick an area, but that's where the real planning starts. In that, I got to start doing research. I want to research the area we're going to, and there's a lot of factors that go into that. Climate, number one. Maybe not number one, but climate is a big one. So, time of year is dictated by the climate you're going to. Newfoundland, a lot of rain on that island. Certain times they get hurricanes. Certain times of the year, Atlantic hurricanes. So you have to take climate into consideration, because that goes into what you're going to pack. If you're going to a wet, colder area, the clothing is different, the sleeping bag is different, rain gear, boots, how many clothes you take, because you can't, if you take minimal and you get them all wet and you have nowhere to dry those clothes, then you're in big trouble.
Or if you go to Idaho and it's 80 degrees during the day and 29 degrees at night.
When I look things up, I go through historical temperatures of where we're going. And then I talk to people that have done it and online. And there's not a time where I ever thought I have enough research done. And not trying to plug anybody, but I met this guy on YouTube. YouTube channel is Northwoods Family. Husband, wife, and 2 kids, and they overland in a Polaris General 4-seater. And he wrote a book, UTV Overlanding and Camping. And I don't read books. And I read stuff online and things like that, but for me to sit down and read a book is like almost impossible. But this is all about his experiences, what he learned, tips. Some of it, I already knew. Some of it was like, hey, that I didn't think of that. That's a good source. Online's another good source. YouTube's another good source. Human sources, talk to people. And then what I do from there is, as you can see, I got these. I went out and bought a ton of these because I got tired of using sticky notes and notepads and scratch pads, and so I get these steno pads and I'll start one and I'll write. Here's a build that I did on a machine, but I'll write the trip we're going on, and then I'll start writing notes, and then I transfer notes to Excel spreadsheets and Word documents, and that's what I send out to these guys. Some trips we have meetings. Sometimes we just have a call on the phone and talk about stuff, but we actually meet on some of it, because we all live close to each other, with the exception of John, yeah. So the core group meets together, and then we pass on information to everybody else that's planning on going if they can't make the meetings. But even when we've done the calls, everybody's got on the call and we're planning things. And again, having more than just my eyes on it. I may do all this planning, but never is it just my plan. I give it to these guys. They, say, what about this? What about that? And that's what I want. I want them to question, to make sure I'm not making any mistakes, make sure I didn't forget something, make sure there's something that maybe I didn't think of that they did. Because you kind of get tunnel vision when you're doing this. And I look at it through what I want to see, which is just human nature. It's not being selfish. It's just, this is my vision of it. I want to get their vision of it because that's the whole part of planning the trip. So that was a good source for me. I get the notes in the steno pad, and then I start transferring stuff over to, digital documents and start pumping those out to guys.
I think at this point, it's probably, this is not for the faint of heart. What Rob does in this planning is not for the faint of heart, because we're talking probably a minimum of a year's worth of planning to go on a minimum of a year's worth of planning to go on an overland trip. And again, as Greg said, Rob does the bulk of the stuff with this, and then bounces stuff off of us. Hey, what is it you want to see here? Where do you think we should go? How do you think we should do this, that, right? But the bulk of the actual planning is done by Rob.